So
Have you
let's
ever
go
seen?
back to
Yeah.
1988. Now, you've been at
Okay.
Adobe 3
Okay.
years.
Let me make
Adobe's
some sound.
products at that time were
I gotta make some
PostScript.
sound effects.
No. We can bend you and wave.
It's 19,
There he is.
19.
Look at him. The young man, Russell
Ah!
Preston Brown. He's just a kid.
Oh my goodness. That is 1988. That was 1988.
Wow. So Adobe's products at the time were a type manager, which I had, I owned. Um, did you have some PostScript editors or PostScript readers or anything like that?
1988, the closest thing to editing PostScript would have been using PageMaker.
Like BB Editor page. Okay, yeah.
And to actually write PostScript, which I did, I just did it on a dumb terminal in those days and just wrote the text.
I played with that a little bit because it's kind of cool because you could send PostScript to the laser writer and it would print. And so you could write a fractal or something in code and it would print this beautiful thing. And that was kind of fun to play with. I didn't do very much of it because there weren't many tools. It was kind of primitive, as you say. But
so imagine I'm doing an entire magazine publication entirely in PostScript in those days. Yeah, that's right. So we didn't. Okay, here it comes. Here's John Warnock's message. You're looking for text, graphics, and halftones. And so I had to bring both text, graphics, and halftones to a document. And if your research crew in the back looks for the magazine called Colophon from Adobe, they might find an old image of it on the web. So Colophon was the name of this publication that I was creating to demonstrate what could be done if there were applications like Adobe InDesign, which is out today. So what could someone do if they really had a powerful desktop application which could kern and lead and add graphics and images? And so I had to create these things and program it and write it as code.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah. So when Illustrator came out and Photoshop came out, I threw away that part of my brain which knew how to write PostScript code, and it was so much nicer just to draw. You could draw a circle instead of writing a circle.
Wow.
So that's 1985 when Illustrator came out, and I could then move on from writing code because Illustrator wrote the code for you because you just drew the shapes.
So Illustrator was written in-house?
Written in-house. Yep. The fellow's name was Mike Schuster. I cannot believe I just remembered that. I don't know what I had for breakfast. I don't know. I don't even know if I ate breakfast, but I know Mike Schuster's name.
It's funny how the brain remembers the older stuff better than the newer stuff. Those memories are burned in of those heady days. It must have felt great to be able to use a tool like Illustrator to do those things that you were hand coding. I can't believe you were hand coding.
Heaven help me. You're bringing back all this pain.
Yeah.
It's sort of like using rub down type.
Yeah. But so then it
was exciting.
So then somebody gets a call from this guy named Thomas Knoll.
That's right.
And what does Tom say to you?
Well, I must correct you. It was not Thomas Knoll who contacted Adobe. It was his brother John Knoll.
John was at ILM, right?
Yeah. So it's really John who the world owes a favor to John Knoll at ILM because he inspired his brother to take this early program called Display and turned it into Photoshop. But before it was Photoshop, by the way, for a trivia question, it was called Photo Hut.
Photo Hut?
You remember those little photo huts in the parking lots we used to drop?
It's a terrible name. Tell me Hut stood for something like, Hue, something.
Oh, there was Hue, no.
Urgency, transparency.
John Knoll saw the photo huts in the parking lot.
That was it.
1980 and whatever. And he just remembered that's where you turned your film in to have it processed. So he took it to the photo hut.
Wow.
But he couldn't have that name because it was already copyrighted. Where was I in this story?
Well, fortunately, so Tom, who was the genius and is working with the bits, had a brother who saw something and said, you know what, we got to do something with this.
That's right.
And his brother was at Industrial Light and Magic, so he was working in this field already.
So he was using the early programs that his brother wrote to adjust the images that appeared in the movie The Abyss.
The Abyss. Wow.
This was the very first movie to use the technology that Thomas wrote to adjust the frame-by-frame imagery in The Abyss. And so that was James Cameron was using the very first versions of Photoshop in those early days.
Tom was a graduate student in engineering, not in design, but he was a brilliant programmer.
Yeah.
And he was actually, according to the official history,
do tell me the official history.
The official history, and then you can tell me the real history. The official history is he was writing subroutines to take monochrome, black and white images and grayscale them. And that was there was some very subtle understanding of imagery in that to this day, I believe, is kind of the core of what Photoshop does.
You say that so well, Leo. It's yes, absolutely. The core technology of Photoshop is based on those early experiments that Thomas Knoll was doing, and then his brother John did the marketing, brought it to Adobe. I saw it, fell off my chair, because keep in mind, you and I were both working with an Atari computer.
Right.
And now we've got this Macintosh, a color Macintosh using Photoshop, and it's doing things that these big mainframes could do, like a Cytex or a Quantel in those days.
Wow.
And so that was just mind-bending. That
was this on a Mac? What was it on?
It's on a Mac. He brought in the first color Mac. What was the first color Mac? It came in a big box on the bottom, and it had a 13-inch monitor sitting on top of it. Was that
the FX?
No, it was the very first color Mac. I just don't remember its name.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine the very first color Macintosh is out, and that's what he brought into the office, rolled that into the office, put it up on the table, and then did this presentation to myself and others, showing us he could make, now this sounds crazy, he could make a selection with a magic wand, and it had a soft edge.
Wow.
In those days. So it's 1989, and he's making soft edge selection with a lasso tool, and he has a soft edge brush. Now, for those who think that's just every day, you should just, that's what you expect. All brushes are soft brushes. You got to think, the previous to that, brushes were square.
Right.
And that was it.
Right. Everything was jagged.
Jagged.
And if you look at Susan Kerr's amazing iconic icon designs for the early Macs, and you look at it closely, there's just whatever, 16 by 16 jaggies, and as it becomes distant, you kind of smooth it out with your eye. But this was, in effect, anti-aliasing, right?
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I just didn't say that. I didn't want to confuse the audience.
Well, no, they're smart. I trust them.
I forgot.
I trust them. So, but I mean, this was, given what you were using, I mean, the resolution on this early color Macintosh wasn't very high.
I don't think it was very high. It may have only been 72. Might have been just screen resolution, right?
And 72 dpi, I think, is actually about right. And so in order to, you put a little gray behind the black to kind of smooth the jaggies out, right?
Yes. And so it was mind-blowing. I had just seen this amazing mind-blowing thing. I was starting to
Photo hut.
Photo hut, and I had to have it. This was going to change my life. I didn't have to sit behind a Cytex operator and point at the screen for $600 an hour, which I actually did when I was working at Atari. I said, move that character to the right
Yeah.
over there, and that cost me $600.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
The early days of editing on a site text. And so now this power had been placed in front of you, and every designer and photographer had this Photoshop and this Macintosh